We have stayed with our three basic concepts, and we elaborated on each. For those of you who haven't been here in the last presentation, I'll try to give a brief summary on each one of them. This is our first idea. It was pretty much, you can see the section. Our basic thought was to cover half of the stadium under a slope, and the top half of it, the higher ring, to make as floating as possible. What started as a way to show a clear concept, we took too serious and began looking at Zeppelin construction. And well, actually, we are now seeing whether we can make it really floating. I would like to start with this example by a Japanese architect named Ishigami. This is neutral buoyant aluminum construction filled with helium, which is in a museum. Where is it?
In Museum of Modern Art in Tokyo. Was.
And it's fixed at a certain height, calculated by the weight of its own construction and the buoyancy of helium, or the ratio between helium and air, density. We found that roughly you need 1 cubic meter of helium to lift 1 kilogram. And well, we started playing with geometry, and we came to 3 basic approaches to address this problem. First one, A, would be to create all the stadium underground or under a slope and have the roof floating. This is probably the easiest way to approach that. And then we get, in terms of flexibility, the ability to move the roof to another location. Okay, to just well, walk with it like a helium balloon and put it in other places in the city, use it for shading, lighting, and so on. Next approach would be B, to keep it as we suggested in the first section, but to keep a very lightweight construction made of, let's say, aluminum, and that would appear as light as possible, and wrap it with a balloon. That would give us the opportunity to, well, we'll show you some benefits of it later, but basically it means that the balloon is not a part of the actual stadium itself, but merely a cover. And the third option, again, straight to the asylum, having the top ring floating, meaning using as light construction as possible, helium Zeppelin design, and having the top part completely independent, other than the, let's call it, docking station that would allow people to walk up and down and support the weight when it's fully loaded. For our first proposal, we found this precedent. This is called actually the volcano. And we come to the conclusion that it would not fit us so well, because first, the slope is too steep to do anything in it. It's just a sculpture. It's a barrier instead of the invitation we wanted to create. And it's not an integrated approach. So we discarded that. Next one was this thing we showed last time. Well, we like it because it's sexy, and let's not dwell upon that. We thought of an approach to use that shell thing, which can, in that shape, specifically rotate with the wind. If we use our staircases with fixed magnets and put wire on the circumference, sorry?
Did you say magnets?
Yeah. Then the rotation from the wind, because it's a huge balloon, would create, we assume,
Are you
a great deal
suggesting
of
some
electricity.
sort of
It's
windmill at the size of a stadium?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so irresponsible. Beautiful.
Okay. But that was not radical enough for us. So yeah, and still at B. Again, we suggest a section with the roof that is well, detachable, and again you can take it for a stroll. If you remember the context, we have commercial plaza over there, and we thought of just taking the roof to shade that and create an outdoor market with shading or rain protection as well as lighting, which is good for us for adaptability. And the third proposal, which we like, and we think it's even sexier, it's having the whole top ring as a zeppelin. That means that we can really be 24/7. That could be a tourist attraction. We could actually take people to tours on that blimp. We can use it to show commercials on it, and we can park it wherever we like, either for shading or as a stadium. If you remember the master plan, there's a lot of open pitches as part of the overall design of the area as a leisure and sport area. But the problem is that we discussed the paradox of the stadium. To put it in some words, we have the pitch, which is so valuable, it's holy, and no one can use it. But outside, where it's not covered, we have lots of pitches which anyone can use but cannot be protected from rain. So we just thought, okay, let's just take that and cover and create a half-size stadium wherever we want. We just need an open field, and we can make a concert, we can make any kind of venue, just land that thing and let people climb the blimp. So yeah, this is covering the same plaza, only now it's a zeppelin. And of course, at the same time, leaving the pitch, the holy pitch, and the stadium completely exposed to sun and wind and rain like it likes. So here we have, in this section, we have it acting as a stadium for 70,000 people. It can be removed for shading, or it can take the tour in the city. You can have even a small cafe here, or I don't know, whatever function we can force there while not gaining too much weight. Yeah, this is, we can park it everywhere we want, over the river. And this is a thought about how seating would be in that, because shaping a balloon is not that simple. So we're thinking of some kind of a very lightweight aluminum structure, corrugated, and basically it would all be supported on individual limbs. Okay. Our second idea, concept number 2. We have, yeah, this is one, we're sorry. Well, we discussed the chameleon skin, some kind of adaptable skin that can expand, contract, and display media. This is our bottom-up approach, and what we're trying to achieve in this is actually to start with the detail and then go up to the stadium scale. And for now, for the concept, we don't really care about the stadium. We're just trying to figure out how that detail could work. So we're talking about some kind of system that could either create a roof or create shading inside or outside the stadium. Well, this is our first model, which you can't really call a model, but it gives our thoughts. We were thinking of creating some kind of a fabric with 2 rims. Each rim can control its own diameter. And if we have this system of a tensile fabric and 2 rims which are rigid and can change in size, we can create all the different options we discussed. So, for example, we can have the one rim contracted to create the outer shell and can be expanded for shade and cover. So that could be achieved, for example, in this kind of structure, having zigzag members with an engine between them that the angle can be fixed. Sorry. Something like that. these kind of things. Once they are retracted, we get a bigger radius, and when they are contracted, a smaller one. Here, this is a view from the top. And well, I'll leave your associations to yourself. Now, how to create that fabric? That's the second thing we try to tackle. And we suggested 3 approaches. One is the watch belt, the watch bracelet. Sorry. And that could be done in a 2D way or a 3D way. That we showed that last time. What we're thinking now is how does it work in 3D? Whether we need 2 degrees of freedom or 1. Is the angle, change of angle, is enough on one end with a fixed geometry, or should it also expand and contract in a system which works like that? Yeah, we were discussing having individual modules, each one of them independent with a solar cell battery, LED display, and RF system, which could make the whole thing act like a huge screen. Another approach would be the accordion, in which wrinkles are incorporated, having the ultimate length and a simple system that could actually wrinkle and therefore create the chain. It could be in any scale. It could be in modules of 60 centimeters, or it could be on the whole facade. And for example, we took the last one, and just by simple means of pushing the members together, we can create this adaptability of skin. It could either be applied horizontally or vertically. Last system of that detail would be what we call the Sigma, and this is actually a system which we thought of in order to get a very, very large amount of expansion. This system described here can expand to 400% its initial length, and that's a concern to us because we have huge differences in geometry over the stadium. So this kind of system, this was like trying to think how we can get a 400% increase in span between two rails. And our last concept we discussed is the lift, using old unused cranes from the Rotterdam harbor. We want to utilize that huge masses of steel and construction and just take them and make the stadium out of them. We started with several versions you have already seen, and we have, after studying some figures, we said we would keep with that kind of cranes, which have a huge ability to lift, and they're also wide enough to incorporate vertical movement axis in them, meaning staircases, elevators, and maybe some functions. So that's our new solution to it. Instead of using insane numbers like we stated last time, we are offering actually a system of very, very large cranes, but only 4 of them, which not only they would act like the vertical movement axis, they would also adjust the pitch of the roof. And thus can create maximum exposure to the sun if we're talking solar, and shade if we need to shield the actors from being blinded by the sun. This is before and after, sorry. This is when one of the cranes just pulls upwards. Now about functions,
Yes, those were the 3 basic concepts that focus on each aspect that we chose to focus on. And the programmatic functions that we search also for the way to make it sustainable and adaptable in an architecture, in the planning, in a programmatic way. And we try to look at the different, you saw in all the three concept sections and plans, which are incorporate the existing program and try to fit everything where we can. And we also, as last, we did some research on what we could put. We also first talk about markets, and actually as an argument to why a market and how a market can be sustainable 24/7, we pinpointed all the markets in Rotterdam, the timing from where they're open, and we see that this is the stadium area, all this area which is to be under development and are going to host a large amount of residents that are functioning 24/7 near the market, compared to, they have to feel equal to the others. So, you see, more or less. The good thing is that it runs weekly, so all days, you see from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. And the other thing is that, as you saw from their program, from the municipality, they had a large amount of space which was unexploited, and we thought of another 24 commercial, more to the stadium introverted economic, let's say, and it's the expos. So we entered the official site of the Netherlands about the exposition, and we saw that in Amsterdam, expositions, temporary commercial expos are held in, you see, there are about 30 here, and all in the same place. And in Rotterdam, we have only 5 through the entire year. So we can exploit the fame that the stadium will get and the space which is empty to fulfill every week those expos. And if you check the calendar, we didn't have time to put it, all of these are weekdays too. So the main expositions are taking part of the weekdays. Plus, they need a week before and almost a week after to dismantle and so it's about 3 weeks, 2.5 to 3 weeks per expo. So if you have an amount of 10 to 15 expos per year, you have 24 functions in the stadium. The two basic core and conclusion.
Well, our last critique was about integration, so we have one thought about it. If we incorporate the first idea and the second idea, then
Yeah. Okay.
thank you.
Question? Any question? Yeah, in terms of timing, probably is less effective in terms of making up our minds in what we're going to express as a final advice, but maybe we can already start with the one by one so that we can ask questions but also give the preference already. Is it fine?
A really quick, more general comment. Can you go back to the beginning of your presentation? It was really the first order, yeah. So the second and this slide and the next slide, let's say, buy you time. Because in a sense you found an image that sort of represents where you are going. And let's say as a presentation technique I find that effective. Because I get less impatient when I see two images that sort of line out where they are going. I thought the previous presentation didn't have that. So take note, it's a good way of buying yourself time. No, at least did you have to? Can you underscore that? Do you find that to be effective? Yeah. You buy some patience with that. So I thought that was really well done.
Yeah. So I will start with Patrick.
All right.
Question and the comments.
Okay, let's start with a comment about option 1. which is of course very radical solution, but maybe on the other hand that's also very simple, and so I think it's pretty boring. I mean, it's more or less there. When you have a big sampling, it's going away, it's coming back, but that's all basically. So it's maybe, I think it's a bit too simple how you make a life. And the third option, I think I liked it somehow lastly when I saw the grandstand, it's a little bit simplified, but maybe it's a little bit too much working with mechanical elements and moving elements, which is maybe something from the last century. So my favorite or my proposal would be to continue with option 2, but with a big but. And I like the idea of this kind of mega surface folding and going up and down, but I have big doubts about a lot of mechanical elements you try to integrate there as well. So I think if you continue option 2, you should look much more into textile engineering, how to fold textiles, maybe how to work with different kind of textiles which are able to stretch, with others which are not able to stretch, maybe working with some stiff elements in the textile as well. But I think there are a lot of possibilities to explore, to create some kind of really large-scale surface which is able to perform this shape.
I disagree with Patrick. Okay, let's kick out option number 3. Let's go to option number 2. I mean, you know, when I was in Beijing and saw the bird's nest, you know, I thought like, okay, this can't be topped anymore. You know, I mean, I'm from Munich and I saw the Allianz Arena, and it's a very nice glowing object. Of course, there's the folding down mechanism, which adds more value, but I mean, in a way, this glowing light bulb stadium things, as such, even if you integrate a lot of technology, it's just one other of these glowing stadiums in the row. So for me, it's not so interesting anymore. I like the option number 1, and we had a quite intensive discussion the other day about what exactly to do. So if you take these 3 options, one is the windmill, the horizontal windmill. I think it's interesting to produce energy, but then of course you will never get this floating appearance, which was sort of in the first initial design idea. And yeah, I think the most radical one is, you know, make it really a blimp, let it really fly, and smartly combine it with programs. So when you have a VIP lounge, you have a cafeteria. We discussed the issue of, you know, how much helium or whatever gas you would need in the weight. So I think the challenge would be there to make an as lightweight as possible structure, where you still have the seating, and you know it lands on very slender elements, and then you fill it with spectators. And what I thought was novel, what I did not hear in the discussion before, was that you can land it on any place and make it a sort of an indoor space, you know, wherever. So I think, you know, working these flying elements in these different programs in this 24/7, I think this is for me, yeah, the most promising.
Something that I've been missing is first the integration. I think none of these 3 ideas, let's say, are mutually exclusive. And for instance, the last slide you showed was also a bit of the worst, because it's like, 5 minutes. So that's a too easy answer, obviously. So by integration of these ideas, let's say it's not sufficient to make repeat of archigram, right? In a sense, you have to go further. And last week we also spoke about this idea. I really like this. What the can you go back to the render of the of sort of this cloud thing? Yeah. So what this image evokes is 2 things to me: a lightweight steel structure with a fabric. And I think as a methodology, you should explore that and explore that more in depth, and not remain at sort of a global conceptual archigramesque level. So when you were starting to explain the number of volume, lift, etc. and so on, I think that's interesting. But you remember this BMW concept car, right? that's what this image evokes to me, and that has not been elaborated on. So my preference would be that you explore that direction. You've done a lot of sketching. There's enough ideas. Now, hone it down. But what's really interesting is that, look, I'm not even going to I don't dare to step into the topic of manufacturability of this. But at another point, I also think maybe it can be done cheaply, right? This idea of fabric and a lightweight structure, I find that a very evoking idea. And also because it doesn't exclude this idea of movement, right? Normally this idea of movement in the previous presentation that we've seen, that were already, all of those were very, very costly. Moving a football field is very costly. You know, this back and forth is very costly, very heavy. Here we see a lightweight, more fabric-based approach on that. And that really hints at something. But elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, nobody seems to want to talk about sustainability, so I sort of between the lines, but that's okay.
What do you mean? It's a big windmill. I find it very.
Yes, absolutely. That's
the core.
But they sort of dropped it right away, didn't they? They said
they dropped the ball.
More exciting enough for something. No, if you can use this to produce electricity, that would be great. But I have a problem with seeing how you're going to do it, because suddenly it's not filled with helium, so it's not terribly light. And the magnets, maybe you can solve it. Yeah, I would definitely encourage you to follow up on that one. As a matter of fact, I feel that all three concepts, even though you don't state it so much, I can read between the lines that they all three have very strong sustainable aspects. So therefore, I would like to give them all my vote. Lightness, which reduces material use, and also energy use for this movement that they're creating in several of them, is one aspect. Another aspect is the possibility to generate power, and the third aspect is the reuse of the existing cranes, assuming that they will be obsolete and not be replaced.
Yeah. But short and sweet, I think we can give you the benefit of the doubt of these wild ideas, but don't betray our trust.
Yeah, it wasn't really your answer.
Basically, I would suggest, in principle, to compare the three examples, in the sense that if you don't establish a way of examining actually and comparing them, it's going to be difficult to decide. Then with respect to the first one, I think you have many problems that you don't address and you will be confronted with, such as aerodynamics, in the sense that turbulence, behavior with respect to fire, etc. So in the sense that there is I think there are problems that you don't seem to be aware of with respect to that. I do think that it's spectacular, seems to be spectacular, but I think it doesn't address the problems that it brings with it. Can we go back to the slide where you have the overview with the many options at the very beginning? Not this one. In the sense that I do think that the idea that actually you would somehow, if I understand correctly, that you actually push the stadium into the earth and you generate a landscape, is this correct? Because this was one of the criticisms for the volcano, that it generates actually a steep surface. But in principle, if you would push it down, you could actually establish a way of walking through this landscape. So this, I do think that it's an idea that could be further developed. But in principle, and many of your ideas are interesting, but I do think that you need to evaluate them, and if you consider to combine certain things, it shouldn't be based on how spectacular it is, but more on very clear criteria. What's good about certain things and what's less. And this would help actually to decide actually which one is more.
Well, though at the end of the presentation, you mentioned this analysis of the markets across the across Rotterdam. So slowly they're starting to work in this direction as well.
Yeah, so if I correctly understand, like really to do some criteria and evaluation that still evidently
I didn't see all of it, but I agree with Henriette that the floating zeppelin is technologically too complicated, and I think it goes beyond the scope of this course. So for me, that would be off. But for the rest, yeah, I don't mind. The first one I think is too complicated.
So you exclude the first one?
Yeah, the floating zeppelin.
Yeah. And but then you still need the
Yeah, then they can evaluate what Henriette says.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we are all making the choice after the but with some clear comment in this case.
I'm sorry. Did you state your preference among the three of them? Because you should.
Well, I think we're leaning towards the first, but I think we are happy with the.
Yeah, I think first congratulations for your presentation. You really got us there. So it's beautiful. But of course, you also didn't do your homework because you didn't address the real problems. You know, you stated sketches which are high up in the sky. And so my advice is just to turn it around. You know, I just love idea one, and I just want you to make this as a stadium. And now you have the problem of making it, and see how far you get. You know, and don't disappoint us. So that would be my advice. Make a flying stadium.
Yeah, thanks for the cue.
I have nothing to add. I agree completely, except one thing: do not ever talk about magnets again, please. Because it's a health hazard for people. Can you imagine the strength of the magnets to keep such an object? Can you imagine?
No,
I think my
myself.
two fillings would fly everywhere.
Maybe.
Not
but,
maybe, definitely.
No, the magnets are not for levitation. They are just for producing the energy out of the rotation, like a dynamo.
There's also a train. The transfer people.
Yeah,
People don't
there's
die.
a Japanese train which actually floats on the rails.
It's German.
German?
Yeah.
Sounds like a Japanese.
It's close, yeah.
They also have one in Shanghai.
So that was for the second option of the first one.
Yeah, it's just the flotation is always based on the helium.
Yeah.
And also not to support all the weight of the full stadium, we didn't mention that, but to support it empty. The support of the people inside, of course, would have to be with the columns and a more standard system.
But you're 24 hours 7, then it doesn't work, because what do you do when you have storms?
Cables, like any other thing.
Well, they figured out.
Yeah, okay.
Great.
Yeah, to me as well, you had a very nice presentation, well done, and very nice sheets as well. But as with the first group, I'm missing a structural engineer in your team. This wonderful windmill is never going to rotate. Yeah? The thing has a certain load, yeah? 20,000 tons, is standing there. So first you need to overwin the friction of the thing before it starts turning. You should make a calculation on that. And then you come to the conclusion, big problem. The other problems you will have with the fabric. The fabric, you get deformations in the thing, like all the windmills in the north of Holland, in the Eemshaven, all those propellers break because of fatigue. Yeah? So you have it everywhere in your construction. So you need, maybe you have a friend in a structural engineer friend. It happens sometimes that architects have friends there. You should take one on board and discuss that a little bit.
What do you think of the idea of fabrics?
The fabric you will see in my presentation later on tonight, the fabric is a very nice material, and I think in the scope it looks wonderful, and as when you keep it stable, yeah, not in rotation, it works. It's nice. But as soon as you start rotating, there will be deformations in the steel structure, and there will be tension and pulling in this fabric. And when the fabric, it only works when it's under a certain tension all around in the same way. But you are going to get different tensions, so possibly the risk of cracking in the fabric is quite big. So it looks wonderful, nice picture, but for the purpose you have, it will be far too expensive, and I think it never rotates. Yeah, and the fabric will crack. The second one you have with all those panels in the roof. Yeah, thousands and thousands of joints. You know the joints. Your client will blame you 25 years that it's not waterproof. You never get it signed off, I think. There needs to be a certain simplicity in a roof when you move panels. Yeah, otherwise you suffer until the end. And then you have deformations, temperature, frost, wind. Yeah, difficult. But I'm the realistic man in the panel, so I like the most and the most sustainable are your harbor cranes. Yeah. And I think you get all Rotterdam behind you, presenting 4 of those harbor cranes in the corners of the stadium. You should look in the internet. In Cardiff, there's a similar stadium. Have you seen that? Harbor cranes. Okay, they have a little bit more an architectural style. Maybe it would be fantastic sustainable when you really find 4 of those machines, when you can give them a nice architectural style. I don't know how, but you are more architects than me, and that would be a fantastic example in the world. But as you presented, they look really massive and not really nice. But you're so creative, maybe you can make them nice. Okay, that's my proposal.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Frank?
Yeah, a bit like the former presentation, I see three ideas that are very generic, which are very interesting ideas, by the way. But they don't have a lot to do, I think, neither of them, except maybe for the last one, the harbor cranes, with this specific location. And if they have to do something with it, it is because of the kind of icon, or the kind of iconographic value they have. Later in the presentation, there was a kind of a notion, I think, about program. And I saw this map with Greek markets in it. And after that, there was something about an expo function. And I think, for me, that was very interesting, because you were touching something which could be the key thing to get this kind of, I call it white elephant in my presentation, to get it going on that side. So I think in neither of these proposals I can see any specificity for this place. So maybe I should just forget about it and then think about what the place would ask from the building. And then I think, and I also said that I think 2 weeks ago, it should be a very strong icon. The building should be a very strong icon. And then it's, for me, it's very clear what is the strongest icon is the #1 volcano proposal. Although I think, and it has probably the most potential if you can program it, and indeed if you can make a stadium out of it, which I really doubt. But if you can do it, and you maybe put it on a little bit different place, for example in the park, so you have this kind of green hill where you can go into, then I think it could be a great building. So I would opt for the first one.
Can we say that at some point they came to an idea almost too quick, right? That without an architectural, let's say, foundation,
It is a bit like product design what you guys have been doing. You skipped a lot of thoughts that had to do with integration of the large-scale program into the city and why it should be on that place. So, on the other hand, I mean, the fact that it should be an icon is still there, and it's also a valid argument. You only missed the other ones.
Yeah, thanks. My last comment, 2 comments actually. One is from like a general request point of view. So without touching the architectural aspects, which are up to the architects, but really from a programmatic point of view in terms of the request of 24/7 as a program. I think that the #1 develop further what are really the functions and the way it's working once it lands, because differently will simply land again a huge space that then you have to figure out what you're using for. And in that respect, I think that still some deeper reasoning can be really added and can add extra value to the idea of moving this space around and living in there with further use. And from a computational point of view, I fully agree with the complexity that, again, the three of them have for different aspects, as partially already discussed. But I would like, again, to focus on the first concept, and I think there are really a lot of technical issues that we have to take into account, but by integrating them from conceptual and perceptual point of view. So that you can, yeah, the idea of perception is very clear, but you might get a bit further, not just in stopping this very first image that you get. So I would really try to develop further another one, but with one big question: is it really feasible, sort of within some boundaries that you give yourself in terms of feasibility, in terms of exploring the feasibility? Is it really something which is completely utopic, or can you really address it in a way that you can make it partially realistic? And if you, at a certain point, don't get to any realistic solution, I would really keep again, like for example, in combination with the others, it doesn't have to be maybe entirely planned in a way, but can you make a portion of it being planned and the rest integrating something which is standing on the side? Or such a combinations without taking out any strength from your concept, but still having a strong concept which in any case somehow realistic within the boundaries that you keep.
Did you study the mechanical plan for the football stadium in Nijmegen? Did you study it? You should study it because you will see what kind of problems you encounter when you make a slope. It doesn't even have the cloud, it only has the volcano.